Good morning, everybody. This is Brad from Portable Technology Solutions, and I'm going to just do a quick kickoff for this webinar to give you a little bit more into the insight we've seen surrounding RFID over the last few years since we've been involved, and also talk to you a little bit about what PTS has going on in the way of what we did last year and what we have to look forward to this year. So anyway, I'll just start off with a little house cleaning before we get into the RFID. There we go. So for those that didn't know, I'm sure you got inundated with our news releases about TracerPlus 8.0 being released, but it has been released, and we're getting some really great feedback on it. It seems like most are very happy with the new user interface, which should make mobile application easier than what it's before. And people are starting to use it on their Google handhelds. Their mobile handhelds for smartphones, tablets. We're seeing a lot of people deploying it to tablets, their regular phones that they use, whether it be HTC or some other manufacturer, as well as the rugged devices that Motorola, Unitech, and all these other manufacturers have out there that now they're starting to release onto the Android platform. For those that are not aware, maybe not as tightly tied into the AIDC industry or their barcoding industry, Android seems like it's really taking its hold, and we have heard that most of the product lines by the leading manufacturers are going to have Android versions over the next year. So it's something to definitely look at as you leverage your technology acquisitions and put everything in place for next year. Another exciting thing we've done, which some may understand or may not understand why we did it, but we put TracerPlus on Google Play. It is not available for sale on Google Play, but it is available for download. And there's a number of reasons we did this for. First, and foremost, it makes it a lot easier to get TracerPlus, the mobile client, onto your handheld. It's infinitely easier to do this, and it also gives you a lot of management capabilities in that you will be able to automatically or be notified through Google Play when there's updates to the TracerPlus mobile client, and they will download after you say it is okay to download them. I would really encourage everybody who's a current TracerPlus user to download a copy from Google Play, check it out, see how easy it is to put it on the handheld, and also you'll see the notifications come in as we put out patch releases for TracerPlus. In 2014, we have a lot planned for our users. There's a major investment in our services at PTS. For those who use our support lines, you've probably heard some new names over the last year, and you'll hear new names this year. It's not that we're switching people out. We're adding people, and you'll see a few names in there. We're also adding a lot in the way of services for application creation, so it's easier than ever to get PTS involved and have us create the mobile app for you if you do not have time to do so. We also overhauled our support contracts in the beginning of 2014. So now all support contracts include support for all licensed TracerPlus Connects, and the upgrades are also covered in that support. So as you renew, you might see a slight increase, but the increase is far less than it would cost to upgrade your license as it was traditionally done, and now you'll get full support on the TracerPlus Connect software with your support agreement. Some really cool stuff in the way of RFID we have going on, and this was really a 2013 feature, but if you are looking into RFID, I don't know if Joe's going to talk about it today, but we have a really cool success story about tag location and how our Geiger counter feature is being used and being deployed. And that's on our TracerPlus.com website. You'll see a really interesting story of how a single user, I think, maybe one or two licenses, is using it to basically test roads with the TracerPlus software. And finally, in 2014, you're going to see a lot in the way of Connect overhauls and new hooks put in for different web service integrations, including Salesforce. These are the things we can talk about now. You'll also hear some interesting news probably in the next couple of months over some of the new products we have planned for our fixed RFID product called Clearstream, and there's some patent pending products that we're working on. That's the first time we ever went down this road, but we think it's so innovative and cutting edge it's worthy of making that investment for our resellers as well as ourselves. So anyway, those that aren't familiar with TracerPlus or PTS that much, we do have our mobile software, TracerPlus, that has been available for around 10 years, and over the last 3 years we got into fixed RFID. It was a natural progression for us, and we're not going to be really going into the fixed RFID today, but we always get a lot of fixed RFID questions when we're doing these webinars. So just how it evolved may answer the questions of how it is used. We released our version of TracerPlus for mobile RFID, I think 3 years ago, and we called it Doing Mobile RFID the Right Way, where we could do multi-scan tags. And everybody started asking us about, well, you know, it doesn't really pay to have an operator pulling a trigger in certain instances. We want a portal or a room to passively or without human intervention collect data. So we looked around, we tried to get partners involved, and we noticed there was really nothing like TracerPlus in the price range, as well as the ease of configuration available for fixed RFID. So we released our ClearStream product 2 years ago, and that is doing extremely well. And we're going to be doing a lot with that over the year in way of pricing and new features. Anyway, today we're going to talk about the mobile RFID. And we still hear the fears from customers and our resellers about getting involved with it. For those that don't know, the advantages are just overwhelming. We've seen people take inventories, whether it be normal inventories of normal product or let's say those hard-to-handle products, maybe something that's very large and hard to reach. Those inventories have been cut in amazing ways. It's not uncommon for us to hear that an inventory that used to take 2 to 3 weeks, we've even had reports, and I think there's a story about a monument headstone company on our website that took 3 months to do their inventory, and they have it down to a day or two. The ROIs are definitely there, and it's all built in with our normal TracerPlus software. All you need to do is upgrade your hardware to do RFID, whether it be a Motorola scanner or a Bluetooth scanner, you can do it. Our software has a lot of great features in it, including multi-scan. We talked about the Geiger counter and the ability to read and write to tags. So Joe is going to really dive deep today, I think, into creating an application, just so you can see how easy it is. Hopefully a lot of you, you're using the desktop already and creating barcode applications. Well, I think you're going to see how easy it is to just switch over to RFID and at least give it a try. Again, the technology is there. The tag prices are dropping every day. The hardware prices are dropping, and now we have the TracerPlus software in there, so you no longer have to custom develop anything, and you can use something that's right off the shelf and that's constantly being developed to work with the new future upgrades of the hardware manufacturers and the tags. So at this point, I will pass it over to Joe. We'll take questions at the end of the webinar, and really we're looking forward to your feedback. And hoping that you can get out there and try our applications on the Google Play Store. I think that's really worth a little bit of your time to give that a go. You'll see how easy that is, but also to try out the mobile RFID when you have a moment. And thanks so much, and I'll flip it over to Joe now, and we'll get into the meat and potatoes of the webinar.
All right, thank you, Brad. Hello, everyone. I'm Joe Crable. I'm a mobile solutions architect here at PTS, and I'll be doing the guts of the webinar today. I'm going to kind of dive deep into what we're going to, what the capabilities of mobile RFID are with TracerPlus. So I'm going to start by opening our TracerPlus desktop tool. Just a note, all of this is available for free trial. So if you just go to TracerPlus.com, click our Take a Trial link, you'll be able to download the desktop product for free and also deploy to any mobile devices that you may currently have. So I have a Motorola MC919Z that I'm going to be doing the demo with today. So you'll see we're looking at the device here. So I'm just going to go ahead and create a new project. And by default, you'll see that we have, actually new to version 8, we moved the scanning functionality to be set at a session level. Before it was globally, where it would affect all sessions enabled. We now put that at a session level, so now you can enable or disable barcode scanning or RFID at a particular session level. This would also allow you to set different aspects of the RFID per session. Say a session you're using for multi-read, you may want to set that to a power level that's at its highest at a value of 30, or maybe you're doing another session that's for locating tags. Maybe you want to turn down that power a little bit. You can actually adjust that independently per session. So I'm just going to show you what would happen if we just turned on RFID with a basic session. We'll create a default form, and I'll go ahead and deploy this to my device. Okay. So right now, if I were to go into session 1, and if I were to pull the RFID trigger, it's just going to read a bunch of tags in succession based on the after scan setting. So that's something you wouldn't want. So what we want to do is be able to set this to read multiple tags at once and then end up submitting that as multiple rows of information. So the first thing I want to show you is we do have a project like this on our Solution Center. So if we go to our samples, we click our asset tracking, you'll notice an RFID asset quick scan. So if I select that, we can kind of see what it's going to look like. I'm just going to go ahead and import this. So we can take a look. We have 4 fields here. We actually have a location field, a tag ID, as well as a date, time, and we also have a record count for actual tags that are being read. So if I jump over to Form Designer, you'll see our form designed. We can actually adjust this, so I'll deploy it first and just show you that this is going to look a little small on our screen because it was designed for the the Motorola MC3190Z, which has a shorter screen height. So if I were to open this form, you'll see we have some extra space down here at the bottom. So we can actually quickly fix that by changing our form size. So I'll just change to our standard height, and then I can just drag some of this stuff down. Slide this down, and we'll make this grid a little bit bigger. Now if I were to deploy this, we should now see an updated screen. Okay. So here's our longer screen. Looks like we have this enabled for full screen, so we could even increase this more so, but in this case I'm not going to. I just want to clear out my session here. So I'm going to delete our existing data. So the goal of this session is basically to select a room location you're in, or maybe a building location, and then you're just basically going to wave the RFID scanner around the room, and it's going to pick up all the tags. So picture how much time that can save you as opposed to going to each item, scanning a barcode. That requires line of sight. You may have to pick the item up, turn it a certain way to scan it, reach behind a computer to scan it. This allows, you don't need line of sight for RFID, so this allows you to scan a room much, much quicker. So I selected my room. Now I'm going to scan the 50 or so tags that I have here. So the first thing I need to do is enable our RFID, and we'll just push that out. You'll notice that you can have barcode and RFID enabled at the same time. That is an option available to users. That may be something you use when you're actually writing to tags. You may want to scan a barcode first and then write that value to an RFID tag. So you can have both running at the same time. So I'll select my room, and then I'll pull my RFID trigger here. So you'll see as I'm reading tags here, you'll see that grid count in the bottom right actually start to increase. And once I let go of the trigger, our grid here is going to refresh, showing us all the tags that we just scanned. So I just scanned 38 tags in a matter of seconds. So now what we want to do is post those scans. So we just scanned 38 items and posted all those records within seconds. So if I were to come back to view data, here's our 38 records, all have that room 101, and it also captured our current date. And so here's all the tag IDs that we picked up. So that's what I wanted to show you from the Solution Center aspect. Now I'm going to create this very same application from scratch just to show you how easy it is to set this up. So to start fresh, I'm just going to delete my data. And now I'm going to come over to the welcome screen. I'm going to create a new project. So we'll name this one RFID demo. There's nothing really specific to RFID in these settings here. We have some various admin and launcher and connect settings you can configure here, but since we're focusing on RFID, I'm just going to deal strictly with that. So for our first session, we'll call this RFID multi-read. And we'll do something similar to what we had. So we'll have a location. We'll have a tag ID. We'll have a date time. And we'll have a grid count. So I'll remove any unnecessary fields. So for our location, we want to choose from a drop-down, so I'm going to set this to a type of drop-down. And then we can create a few options here. So we'll say room 123, room 405, room 407, and maybe we'll say server room, and we'll leave it at that. So now we can also set the flow of the application. So after we select the location, we want it to jump down to the tag ID field. Since the tag ID is the only thing we're going to be scanning, we're going to want to remain in that tag ID field after each tag scan. Date time we'll just define in our data type here. And then we can even set a custom format. So for those of you in different regions, you can actually set this format accordingly. And the grid count is just going to be a read-only field. It's going to take basically a record count from that grid control that we put on the form. So once we define our field settings, we're going to jump over to the form designer. And I'm just going to create a default form. And we'll go ahead and jazz that up a little bit. So we don't need the grid count label. We'll stick our grid count down here in the lower right. We could even put this off the form. If I were to cut and paste this, we could stick this down here, just give us a little bit more room. Date time, that's not something we need to see. So I'm actually going to cut this and then paste it outside of the canvas. You'll notice something new to version 8 is the form designer has been drastically changed. We now show the visible canvas area, and you can actually store controls that you don't want to see in this area. The reason we're keeping this is because we're going to need to bind this control to our grid so that it captures that data. So maybe we'll align these location and tag fields. Make the tag field a little bigger. Location doesn't have to be as big. So the next thing we want to do is add a grid that's going to capture all of our tag info. So this grid is going to be pointing to wherever we want to submit these RFID tag reads. I'm just going to submit it to the local session But you could also submit this to a remote session, like an RFID tag list. Maybe you want to update rows based on things that are scanned. You could do that by pointing this grid to a different session. But in this case, we're just going to choose our default source session here. And we're going to add the columns of information that we actually want to capture. So that'll be 3 columns. The first will be our tag ID. Second being our location. And the third being our date. So we can select the source field that that column ties to. So if I'm on the date field, I'm going to select date time as our source. For location, I'm going to select location. And for the tag ID, I'm going to select tag ID. So another option you'll see here is the column width. So the only thing I really want to see on the device is the tag ID, so I can set this column width to 200. And for the location and date, I can actually set these to 0 so they don't actually display in the grid. So if I were to hit done, we should see our grid defined with our tag ID. So currently, as it stands, this grid is in what we call a live mode. So it would only display data that were physically submitted to the session. So we actually want to change this to what we call a cache mode, so we can actually cache the records scanned as they're being read, and then we'll do a global post of all that data with a single click. So one of the options in our selected control properties is something called cache mode. So we set that to true, and once we do, we get a few more options presented to us. So one thing you can do is trigger beeps when a row is added or updated. So in our case, as a new tag is scanned, it's going to add a row to our grid, so we want it to beep when that happens. So by setting that to true, every tag we scan will present a beep to the user. So the next thing we want to do is bound our field controls to this grid. So if we look at our fields here, so if I look at the location, you'll see that it has a control ID. Every control in the swarm has a unique control ID, and it's what we use to reference certain aspects of the form. So our location is a 5, our tag ID is 7, and our date time is 9. So I'm going to jump back into the grid properties. You'll notice that if you click the data options, you'll see a little ellipsis button here. That's how you get to that grid properties form. So for tag ID, that control ID was 7. So you'll see under data we're presented with some more options here. So we want to set this to a binding direction. We want to get that from the control. And then the bound control we want to bind is control number 7. We're going to do the same for location. This control was 5. And we'll do the same for date, which was 9. We do have some other settings here that I'm not going to use. You could actually prevent a tag from binding to the grid based on this value here. We have a required in binding. Maybe you don't want to bind something to this grid until all data is entered into 3 or so fields. So you could do that by setting this required in binding to true. All right, so I'm going to hit done. So the last thing we need to configure is our data capture settings. So I'm going to turn off barcode scanning and enable our RFID scanner. In this particular case, I'm reading in a hexadecimal format. You can actually read in 2 different formats, one being hexadecimal, which is the most common used and really the way RFID was meant to be used. But there's also the option of an ASCII setting. That's more of a human readable type setting. So picture you're scanning an asset barcode of IT 12345. You may want to encode an RFID tag with that particular value, and to do so, you would have to do it in ASCII, since hex only supports the letters A through F and the numbers 0 through 9. So that would be a case for ASCII if you actually wanted your RFID tag data to match what you currently have. But a lot of people will take the hexadecimal value of a tag and then just associate it with that asset ID in a database. Okay. So now we're going to go ahead and add a smart form rule. This is another way to kind of control how RFID data can flow. So you'll see RFID read complete. So what that's basically going to do, as soon as you read an RFID tag, it's always going to stick it in this tag ID field. So this is a good way to direct the flow of data. A few other settings here. Flush tag settings, I'm not really going to get into that, but that's basically, you could set a different time when you want to clear the RFID memory on the device. When you actually read RFID tags, it stores them in memory. Because it's actually reading these tags, over and over again. So once it stores a particular tag ID in memory, it knows to ignore that, unless that tag list is flushed. Another thing new in version 8 is the scan stop. In this case, we're going to keep it on trigger release, but there's instances where you may want to use RFID similar to barcoding, where you just want to read the tag and then have it stop. Without this setting, it used to just flip through a bunch of tag IDs, and it's basically like spinning a wheel of RFID. So that tag read option allows us to stop on the tag read. So I'm just going to deploy this to my device now. Okay, now that should be deployed to our device. I'm going to slide this back over. So here's our form as we designed it. So if I were to actually, one other thing I just noticed, our grid count, we never assigned that. So if I jump back over to our form designer, so we have our grid count field down here. And if we look at our grid setting, or our grid control, you'll see a record count control ID that can be set for this grid. So this is basically telling the grid to display the record count in a certain control. So if we look at that grid count, that's control ID 11. So I'm going to set that to an ID of 11. And we're just going to push this out again. Okay, so let me slide my device back over here. So there, now we have a record count of 0 because we're pointing that grid to that record count field here. So we'll enter a room, and once again we'll pull our RFID trigger here. And you'll see that count going up. It's hard to hear the beep since the volume's a little low, but as each of these tags are being read, there's a beep being emitted from the device. So here's a list of 37 tags I just read. So if I were to hit submit, this is another thing I'm going to show you. This is just a regular submit button. So what that's going to do is submit a local record to the session as well as all those RFID scans. So in this case, that's probably something we don't want. So I'm just going to clear my data out again. And then if we jump back over to our form designer, we go to our submit button, we can actually change this to a different action. So we do have something specific to RFID, or to the actual grid. It's something called grid post. So this will only initiate the posting of all the items in that grid, and it won't actually submit that local record we saw where we got that extra record. So the thing we need to set here is the grid control ID that this grid post should be working on. So if we look at our grid control, we see an ID of 15. That's what we want to set our grid post button to. So I'll just push this out again. And we'll pull up our device. So I'll select our room, and we'll do some scans again. So we have 19 here. I'll just click the Submit button. Now it should give us 19 records. So if we go to our View Data, we should have not only the tag IDs, but those the room and the date that we associated are bound in that grid. So here's all of our tag IDs, and these are unique tag IDs that are being read. Here's our date and the location they were read from. So this is a nice way to scan, items in a room rather quickly and very efficiently. So the next thing I want to show you is our tag locator or Geiger counter. That's something new we added to version 8. So I'm going to add a session to my project here. Session 2, we'll call this tag locator. So in this instance, the only thing we'd really want is a tag ID. So I'm going to remove everything else. Go to our form designer and build our form. So we have our tag ID. We'll make this a little bigger. And then maybe we want to present a different message to the user telling them what to do. So we'll modify our caption here. So we'll call this enter tag ID below and click the locate button to locate an asset. And we don't need all these additional buttons here. And we want to make sure we're not prompted when we leave the form, so we'll set that confirmation prompt to false. So the only other thing I want to add is a button that's actually going to bring up our tag locator. So we'll call this locate. And maybe we'll make this bigger to the user. Maybe we'll change the color. Change our font color. And what we want to do is set an action of RFID tag locator to this button. And now you'll see that we have an RFID option in our control properties of a tag ID, control ID. So we want to set this to the control ID in the form that's going to contain our tag ID to locate. So that's our tag ID field, which has a control ID of 5. So I'm going to set this to 5. So the next thing we want to do is set our form designer here, or actually, sorry, we just did that, our data capture. We want to turn on our RFID. Once again, we'll leave it at hexadecimal. We can leave our radio power on. This may be an instance if you're actually scanning around the room for RFID tags. You may actually want to do the scan stop on the tag read. You could also enter this information manually into the field and then try to locate it. And then a third option being maybe you select an item from a grid, which then translates that into the tag ID, allowing you to find it based on that. I'm just going to keep it very basic today. So once again, we'll set our smart form rule of RFID tag, or RFID read complete to tag ID. And we'll go ahead and deploy this. All right, so now you'll notice a second session of Tag Locator. So now if I were to pull the trigger, you'll notice I actually have a bunch of tags hovering above the device, but you'll notice that it stops reading right after the first read. So once I read a tag, I'm going to click our Locate button. That's going to open our RFID Tag Locator dialog. So you can choose to turn off the beep, but by default it's going to beep as you're locating the tag. The more it beeps, or the faster it beeps, the closer you are to the tag. There's also a progress bar here as well to indicate that same thing. You can also adjust the power level right from here, so if you want to turn up or turn down the power level based on other tags being in the vicinity, you could do so. So from here you can actually click this Locate button, or you can hold down the trigger on the RFID device. So you'll see here, I'm scanning some tags. I'm not really sure which one I read. So I'm just going to wave these tags in front of the device here. So you'll see as I get closer to a tag, it's going to beep more, and that progress bar is going to show further along. But that's a good way for you to be able to locate a tag. That's pretty basic, pretty easy to set up. That's all I'm really going to cover on that tag locator. So the last thing I want to cover today is the reading and writing ability that we have. So I'm going to add a third session. We'll call this RFID Tag Write. So we'll have a tag ID. Now there's two different things you can write to an RFID tag. You can rewrite the EPC, which is the basically the tag's identifier, or you can write to the tag's user bank, which is an additional memory bank you can use to assign additional information about an item on that tag. Currently, the EPC tag bank, if you're reading or writing in hex mode, that supports 24 characters, or 24x characters. If you're writing in ASCII mode, that jumps in, or cuts in half, so you'll only be able to write 12 characters of ASCII data to a standard EPC tag. The user bank portion expands upon that, where you can write 64 characters of hex data to the user bank, and then 32 characters of ASCII data to that same user bank. So maybe in this case we're going to write to the tag's user bank. So what we're going to do here is we have our tag ID field, and then we want a field to write. We'll just call it write to user bank. And I'll remove all the additional fields. Jump over to our form designer, create a default. So now we'll make this a little bigger here, because we'll probably enter a significant amount of characters here. So notice our tag ID field has our control ID of 5. Our user bank field has a control ID of 7. So what we want to do is add a button to perform this RFID write function. So we'll call this write tag. Set our button action to, we should have an RFID tag write. So once we select that, you'll see different RFID options here. We have a tag ID control ID, a read-write control ID, and the tag memory bank to actually write to. So our tag ID control ID was control ID 5. So that's specifying what tag ID we should be grabbing and writing the data to. So that's grabbing the tag data from control ID 5. And then our read-write control ID is going to be the control in the form that we want to write the data from. So that's our write to user bank field, which is control 7. So that's what we'll set here. And lastly, we can choose which memory bank on the tag we want to write this to. In this case, we're doing the user, which is the default setting, so we'll leave it at that. If you did want to write the EPC, you would just change that bank here. So we'll just go ahead to our data capture and set our RFID settings. So this may be an instance where you would want to use the barcode scanner to capture maybe additional info about an item, where you could actually use the barcode scanner and then write that information to a tag. So I'll just show you different ways you can actually control that. So we go back to the form designer, and we go to tag ID, you'll see an input type setting. So if we set this to RFID, this allows you to only scan RFID tag info to this field. So once you have focus to this field, only the RFID scanner will be on, the barcode scanner will be turned off. So if we were to then go to the write to user bank field, we could set this to barcode. Now only the barcode scanner will be turned on when focused in this field, and the RFID scanner will be turned off. So that's a way you can have both enabled but still control what's turned on per field. So I'm going to deploy this. Let me just singulate a tag here for writing. So we'll go to our RFID tag write session. So I'll go ahead and scan our tag. Hopefully we get this one that's in front of me here. Actually, let me change the go-to fields to tag ID. And another thing we want to set is our tag read, or scan stop. We'll set this to tag read. So let me just push this update over. And let's read our tag. Hopefully I get the right one this time. There we go. So this is a tag that I had hovered over my device. So now what we want to do is write to this user's memory bank. So right now, if I were to pull the scanner, my barcode scanner is on, but you'll notice it's not reading any RFID tag that I have hovered over here. So if I were to scan a barcode, so I don't know if you heard the beep or not, but I just scanned a barcode label here. Maybe this is the serial number of the item. So now we want to click the right tag. Up in this case, it is a little finicky. Depends what's in the area. If there are other tags in the vicinity or the power level. Let me try to isolate this a little bit more. There we go. Our RFID tag write was successful. It is best practice when writing to tags that you isolate the tag from surrounding tags, as that can interfere with the tag writing process. So now that I actually written to this tag, now we need to be able to read that information. So now we're going to create another session called RFID tag read. So we'll have our tag ID, and then we'll call this user bank read. So we'll remove all our additional fields, our go-to fields can go to itself. Jump over to our form designer. It's going to be a very similar setup to our RFID tag read. So I'm going to add a button. So maybe we'll actually put it underneath the tag ID this time. We'll call it Read User Bank. So in this button action will be RFID read, or RFID tag read. And you'll notice similar settings to what we had on the right. So we want to select a tag ID that we're reading it from. So that's this tag ID field, which is Control 5. And we want to set our read-write control ID of where we want to read that data to. So in this case being 7. And once again, you select which bank you want to read from. In the case of memory bank reading, it's very rare to actually read the EPC since you're already reading that with the actual RFID tag read. So this, most of the time, this will be set to bank user. Let's set our RFID settings here, just our RFID. Once again, we want to scan stop on the tag read, and let me just push this out. Pull up our device, go to our tag read. Now let me try to read our same tag here. Should be our 871. It's a little difficult to read sometimes when you have 1,000 tags in your office. Let me try to get this focused a little bit more here. There we go. There's our 87. If I click Read User Bank, there's that piece of information that we just wrote to that tag's memory bank. So we're able to write additional information to the tag and then also display that in another session when read. So picture, maybe at the time when you're actually writing to a tag, you want to capture its serial number and then maybe the date that it was read. So you can capture that to that user bank, and then in another session when you actually read that asset, instead of having to look up that information from a database, you can actually read it from the tag itself by clicking this read button here. That's pretty much what I wanted to touch on software-wise. I do want to mention the current hardware that's supported for the tag locator. It's only Motorola software right now, or excuse me, Motorola hardware. Currently the MC3190Z, the 9190Z, and we're also really excited about a new product. It's an RFID sled for the MC55, 65, and 67 device. So if you actually have one of those devices, you can add RFID functionality to it by purchasing this sled. And that it just plugs right in and works just like it were integrated to the device. We do have some exciting features coming up for RFID as well. This RFID, you'll see that I had to click a button to read this user bank. We actually included it, or a new feature in our upcoming 8.1 release is being able to read that into a grid without any additional button clicking. Another feature we added was the ability to scan 2,000 plus tags in an actual, in 60 seconds or a minute. So those are things to look forward to in RFID. We've increased performance tremendously. But I do want to mention once again, if you do have any questions, to type them in the chat panel or the question panel. I don't see any right now.
This is Brad. I want to thank everybody for attending. Hopefully we're going to get some questions here. It's important to note that Joe just went over a lot of stuff in a short amount of time. And as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, that we're really concentrating on our service offerings over the year. We're going to have a lot more available. One of the things I'm going to talk about really quickly is the ability to actually purchase training blocks now. So for example, if you have a feature that you really need or want to learn, or maybe it's a couple smaller features to put an app together, we've always had the session setup services available where we'll actually create the application for you based on a specification. But we really understand the importance of training our users. Our users who are creating apps are driving our innovation and really pushing out licenses to many customers. So we want to enable you with all the tools we have. And RFID obviously is one of the more complex tools. There's just there's a lot going on at once. So if this is something you're interested in learning more about, there is an ability to purchase training. It's one-on-one training with an RFID specialist at PTS, and they'll go through creating an RFID application for you in a few hours or 4 hours what's purchased. I believe the minimum block is 2 hours at this time to purchase, when taking into account the startup and end time. Anyway, hopefully it looks like we got a couple questions here. Maybe we can get into those.
All right. So we do have a good question here. Is there locking or perma-lock to lock tags when writing with TracerPlus? So basically what he's saying, once you write to a tag, the ability to actually lock that so no one else can write to it. Currently, we don't support that in the 8.0 release, but it's definitely something we're looking at for an 8.1 release. So keep an eye out for that. We do have a question on this GoToMeeting being recorded. It is being recorded and should be posted later this afternoon to YouTube. So you'll be able to send that to people who didn't attend or use it for your own reference, kind of as a tutorial.
And I don't know, Joe, if you're going to make available the application you created here for someone to download as a template, but that may be something else that we put up in the future on our Solution Center. So if anyone's not familiar with our Solution Center, we do have applications for demo and trial that you can bring into desktop that you can play with and configure as a starting point for an RFID application. Looks like the questions are light today, even though we have a lot of attendees. So either we just blew everybody away with what we've shown them, and we did a great job, or people are going to get onto that YouTube video and review it. So with that, I'm going to leave it open for another 2 minutes, see if we see any other questions, and then we'll close the webinar. So a last call for questions here.
Yeah, if you do have any questions afterwards, you can direct them to some of the contact info on the slide. You can also see some of our resources at Facebook, Twitter, as well as YouTube, some of our training videos for other aspects. If you wanted to learn more about the desktop product, we have webinars specific to that. And another product I didn't talk about today was our TracerPlus Connect product, which allows the actual syncing of this data seamlessly to the database of your choice. So we also have webinars on that as well.
Okay.
All right, so it looks like we don't have any more questions. So once again, I want to thank everyone for attending and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.